everyone. Welcome, and thank you for being here today. As you can see, I'm using sign language, and the voice you're hearing is my interpreter over here, John and Christy Listina. If anything goes wrong, it's their fault, not mine. I'm just kidding. If anything goes wrong, it's my fault. I like to put the interpreters on the spot. So my presentation today will be focused on being human. And I'm going to go into the variety of what it means to be human. It's not a fully deaf-oriented focus. I am deaf. I'll talk a lot about the deaf experience. But a lot of what I want to share with you is pretty applicable to everybody. The screen is a little dark. Can everyone see? Okay. So I want to start by talking a bit about myself. Every story starts with the person giving the story. So my name is Charles McFadden, McFadden, McFadden. Honestly, to be transparent, I feel like I'm coming home to this place. This is like Mecca for me. I grew up in Ohio, specifically in Akron, Ohio. Yeah. All of my friends, members of my family, all came to college here. I have never been on campus here before today. I was just like, I can't believe it took me this long. It took me long enough. I don't live in Ohio any longer. I live in Philadelphia now. But I grew up in Akron. I was deaf at the age of 4, and I was mainstreamed for most of my formative years, I guess you'd say. Yes, I'm sorry.
What does mainstream mean?
Mainstreamed. Oh, interesting. So it's signed like this, meaning on this hand you see several fingers. That's the regular community, the regular population, and I'm the one deaf person there. The idea is there's different methods of education. I'm not going to go too deep into that. There's philosophies behind all of them, pros and cons for all of them. The one that I was in was where I was in a world with regular people functioning as if I was not deaf. The theory behind it being that that's the real world. Sink or swim. So that's where I was. That's kind of how I started. That's what I went through. When I graduated from high school, I went to the Rochester Institute of Technology, RIT. The gentleman over here, Dr. Norhaus, did a great presentation about how great RIT is. I'm not going to go too deep into that because I agree with him. But I'm a bit of a fanboy of NTID. So I went to RIT and graduated with a degree in computer science. And I was actually a physics major before moving to computer science. And I told him, all the work he's doing, he's 30 years too late for me. So I majored in computer science. And then after I graduated, I got out and worked in aerospace, mostly for Lockheed Martin, doing a lot of big defense projects, sonar systems, communication, satellites, privacy programs, things that if I told you about, we'd have to take you in the back and shoot you.
Did you go to Antarctica at all for that with Lockheed Martin?
No, but I do know people who did. Really? Okay, we'll talk. I'm close friends with the CIO of that program from Lockheed Martin, so we'll talk. So anyway, after Rochester, I started working for Lockheed Martin, and while I was there, I went to grad school and got an MBA from Villanova University. So that's a quick summary of 30 years. I don't want to talk about myself any longer, so we'll move on. So I want to start by telling you some stories about accessibility. 2 different stories. The first one is this image I'm showing you is an outdated typewriter with these funny looking balls that when you type on them. So this was the thing. This is the story I want to tell you. This is a computerized typewriter. But getting into the story, when I was little, my dad, well, my parents, both of them, noticed that I had a thing for math, a thing for science. It was something I liked, I enjoyed, that I was good at. So my dad took me to the University of Akron for some equivalent of exploring the future. So I went around to different classrooms, different majors, and as a deaf kid at that time, accessibility was a problem. But I was too young to understand what that was. I walked into one room, and they had this machine, this typewriter, and it was running on its own. Nobody was typing on it. Letters became words, words became lines, lines became paragraphs. So I walked up and started reading it, and it was telling me a story. The story wasn't really anything special, it was just a story, but it was running on its own, and then it stopped. So I'm thinking, what's this thing doing? So I looked at it, I read the story, and it stopped, and I could see that it was asking me a question. A question that basically said, do you want this, or do you want to do that? So I just looked at it, and I typed on it, and gave it an answer. The answer I gave is not important. But the fact that I gave it an answer, and that it took my answer, and started building a story based on my answer. And it kept going, and then it stopped again and asked me another question. And I'm thinking, okay, what is this? So I respond again, and it went on. The thing that really appealed to me from an accessibility perspective is that for me, I was able to have a full experience of the computer, the experience of what this thing was doing, without having to worry about asking somebody else, what does it say? What does it mean? All of this in front of me. I had equal access to anyone. I enjoyed that. I walked out with that in the back of my head thinking, how does this thing work? How does this thing function? At that time, I didn't get it. To me, it was magic. But really, later on, I learned all about computer programming, but at the time, I didn't know. So when I left, I was thinking, how do they do this? All right, so now I'm going to tell you another story. Math was always a thing that I enjoyed, that I was good at. Without trying to pry, I'm going to just give you some numbers here. You know, back in the day, the SAT scores they'd measure your score before you go to college. And so I was like 10 or 20 points away from perfection on the math side. And I say that just to illustrate this point. When I was a kid, I knew I was going to go into the math and sciences fields. I knew I was going to go into engineering. That's why I chose to go to RIT. However, when I got to RIT, I experienced something that I did not understand at the time. Something was different. Math, when I was growing up, was easy for me. I could read the books, do the problems, figure it out. Easy as a walk in the park. When I got to college, math became funny. It became complicated. It became interesting. But for me, it became hard. For reasons that I wasn't prepared for. So you're looking at me, I'm the guy standing on the wall in this image with his back to you, trying to figure out all the math that's going on the blackboard. Before I could, I had most of the time I could. As you can see, there's an interpreter off to the side trying to tell me what the instructor is explaining. The challenge for me was listening to the instructor through the interpreter, and the interpreter would saying, this thing's happening here, and then you do this over here, and I'm going, okay, what was there and what was here, and then I have to look up at the board, and by the time I'm looking up at the board, the teacher's on to the next line, or the next point that the teacher's trying to make. So I'm trying to play catch up the whole time. What was here, what was there, before, and calculating it in my head, 3 or 4 steps behind constantly. By the time I get caught up, or maybe I don't get caught up, I go back to the interpreter, and the instructor's maybe 2 or 3 lines ahead of where I was when I stopped looking at the interpreter. So for me, that was a challenge that I wasn't really prepared for. And I did the same thing. I majored in physics, and it was the same problem. It kept popping up. And at some point I thought, this is not working for me. What can I study that would not introduce me to this many accessibility problems? So I switched over to computer science. And that's where I spent the rest of my career, working in computers, because I felt it offered me the opportunity to do what I wanted to do with less amount of accessibility problems. But this guy over here, Dr. Nordhaus, is trying to solve that problem. He's just 30 years too late for me. But thank you for what you're doing. So today, I work for CSD. CSD is the Communication Services for the Deaf, the largest social impact non-profit focused on the deaf community in the world. We have annual revenues of about $45 million. And I am their Chief Technology Officer. Basically, all of the IT work that we do runs through me. I have two sides to what I do. One side, I'm working on maintaining the operations of the IT services to our employees. And then on the other side, we're working on trying to be innovative and develop technologies for the future for the deaf and hard of hearing communities. So that's where I am today. One other thing I'd like to mention about CSD. Our primary focus really is employment. Many deaf people are not doing well transitioning from school to work. I'm told that the percentage is like 70% of us are either unemployed or underemployed. When I say underemployed, what I mean is you're in a position that doesn't maximize your value or your skill sets and talents that you have to offer. So between the two, the majority of deaf people are not able to find the careers they want. CSD's primary focus is to help mitigate that problem or solve it through job placement, through training, and different types of services. So that's what we do at CSD. So here on this slide, what I want to talk about is humanity. There's so many variations of us. I'm deaf, yes, but I'm not unique. There are people out there with other types of disabilities, and they're not unique either. I mean, there's a lot of us. We have disabilities involving sight, mobility, cognitive, dexterity, size. You can be tall, short. You can be thin. You can be wide. There's health problems. You can have heart disease. You can have cancer. You can have tumors. So moving away from disability and there's a variety in language, culture, gender, sexual orientation, so much. It all makes us such a diverse human population, community that we live in. Talking about that on a broader scale, but you could also dig down to a small scale. So within the deaf community, for example, there's a lot of subgroups, small differences. People who use cochlear implants, people who don't. People with hearing aids, people without. People who sign, people who don't. People who have some residual hearing and some who do not. And there are deaf people with additional disabilities. They can be blind and deaf. They can be deaf and have a mobility disability. All of this is my way of trying to tell you it's just part of the human experience. So let me carry that point a little further. This slide here, if you look carefully at the image, it's a bunch of people. Some are gray, some have some color to them. The color represents people with disabilities. So basically what it's trying to tell you is that 1 out of 4 or 1 out of 5 of us has a disability of some kind. And this is a visual representation of that. And so it's common. It's a common statistic that's often shared again and again. Another common statistic is that regardless of where you are today, 1 out of 2 of us will probably pick up another disability before we die. More likely than not due to health or old age, but still a disability that we will probably acquire. So to take that one step further for you, most of the time when we talk about disabilities, we talk about permanent types of disabilities. But really there are 3 forms of disability, and people forget about the other 2. There's also situational disabilities. Let's say, because I'm deaf, I can tell you about one example. You guys walk into a bar and it's loud. You can't talk to the person sitting right next to you. You're functioning just like as deaf as I am. That's a situational disability. And then there's temporary. Maybe you wake up one morning and you can't hear because you have an ear infection. Until that's resolved, you're deaf too. So we have permanent, situational, and temporary disabilities. The point that I'm trying to make is that all of us, every last one of us, will have a disability at some point in our lives. I don't think you'll ever meet anyone who hasn't. Maybe a broken leg playing soccer, maybe something got poked in your eye with a fork. I don't know. Maybe you've heard your mom lecture that more times than you'd like. But disability is part of the human experience for all of us. Another thing I really want to drive home is disability is part of the human experience. In our community and in our world, we tend to focus on the extremes on either end, meaning we focus on the strongest, the fastest, the smartest, the wealthiest, the most beautiful, and then there's the rest of us.
Which is a lot more. Ours is a lot.
Yes, thank you. So we live here, not them. So let me move on to my next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about the cure mindset. Nothing wrong with it, but we are, it's ingrained in us as human beings to want to help others, to help people be the best that they can be. We don't want to have people suffer because of their situations. That you yourself would say, oh, I wouldn't want to experience that if I didn't have to, so you'd want to help. That's all well and good. Sometimes, though, we have to stop and ask ourselves, are we looking too much for a fix? That constant search for a fix, it sometimes leads to people who have disabilities feeling less than whole, less than human. So the questions that we need to ask ourselves are, when does that become too much? When does it become limiting rather than liberating? When should we start to embrace individuals for who they are? The only way to really know is to ask them. Ask them what they want. Ask them what they need. Every person's going to have a different answer. I think one of the most common answers is independence. They want to be able to function on their own, pursue life the way they want. So what I'm really trying to encourage, the mindset here, is an extroverted community. The kind that embraces the value of every person here. Babies, for example, can't do anything, but we love them because of their potential, the potential they bring. The elderly, they might not have the skills to do what they once did, but they have experience that they can share and teach with us. Oh, and then there's all of us in between. And we all have value, and we all have a story to share. Everyone has a lesson to teach, including the quiet ones. So I'm not going to answer the question on the screen. The question up here is, what does it mean to be human? So I'm going to tell you something else. I'm going to tell you there are no broken humans. It is systems that are preventing us from becoming our true, most authentic selves. Systems. There are certain ideas that push us down instead of elevate us. Like I said, disability is part of the human experience. So now I'd like to step a little bit away from that and shift gears a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit more about engineering and what I do as an engineer. Engineering for accessibility. There's 3 ways to do it. And each has their own pros and cons, but I want to go through all of them real quick. The first one is, as many of you may have heard, the 80-20 rule. You engineer for the greatest number, engineering for the benefit of all, but really all meaning the 80%. And then that gives us most of the products that we have. But the challenge for those is once they come out, once they're shipped, once they're out on market, the people who build those products start getting calls from their consumers, their customers, saying, hey, I can't use this because of whatever barriers there are, whether they're blind, whether they're deaf, whether they have mobility disabilities, or they can't move their hands. So then the companies then have to build these fixes into their products after they've been released. So that approach is more costly for them because they have to fix their product after deployment. The second way that they solve it is by engineering for the 20%. The people with the disabilities, the outliers, the outliers, the requirements that require the full set of requirements. So the inside would be the 80, and then the outliers outside are the people with disabilities. So if you engineer for them, you tend to build a product that's more robust and better for everybody, regardless of if they have a disability or not. Think about captions, for example. Captions, texting, was put on the market and deaf people really enjoyed it. It benefited them. But you guys text a lot more than we deaf people do. You guys go to bars now and you watch in captions on the TV in the bars. And we deaf people are like, oh, we don't have to ask them to turn the caption on anymore. That's great. So my point is, when you engineer for everyone, you're making it a better possibility for people, a better experience for people who don't have disabilities as well. Because of what I mentioned before, people have permanent, temporary, and situational disabilities. So it applies to you too. I'm sorry. I told you there were 3 engineering models and I only gave you 2. I forgot the third. The third is what I'd call lifestyle engineering. Instead of starting with a product, instead of starting with something that you're trying to build, you start with the person. From the moment that person gets up, takes a shower, they eat, they go to work, they go to school, they have lunch, they come home, they take care of their chores, take care of things around the house, they go back to bed, get ready for the next day. Throughout the entire course of their lives, a day in the life of that person, there are many opportunities for where accessibility can come in and where you can create solutions for them. And when you do that, you find ways to engineer solutions, not just for them, but for everyone else as well. I'll give you an example. A simple one. There's a deaf person here giving you a presentation. You see me walking over here so much because if I stand over here where my laptop is, it's a great podium, but those interpreters can't see me and you can't see me. So I have to walk over here as I keep doing, and I'm talking to you, and I'm blocking the screen behind me. But I'm making do with the tools I have. So this is something we could engineer from a lifestyle perspective. If you set up this classroom and think about, okay, what kind of speakers are we going to have in this classroom? You could have your normal able-bodied people, you could have a blind person, you could have a deaf person, you could have a wheelchair user. If I was in a wheelchair sitting over here, do you see this whole podium? I don't even know if it's wide enough. But I'm going a little bit further than I think I want to. So now I'd like to talk about bias, hidden bias. When you engineer for anything, when I engineer for anything, it's based on what I know and what I understand and what I see and know and hear and everything. Unfortunately, it's very limiting, even for myself, because the way I experience things is not the way another person experiences things, including other deaf people. I mean, I've had conversations with other deaf people who say, oh, I would have preferred this solution, or this being built a certain way, and another deaf person says, no, I like it that way. I would rather have adapted something over here. The point is, we all have different needs, and trying to engineer based on what you know and what you believe is not always the best way. And so the answer to that is to include people in your conversations. Include people into the discussion of how to solve the problem. Invite them to the table. Better yet, let them drive the conversation. Let them drive the engineering effort to resolve the problems. They can help you understand what they want and what they need. And that goes back to that cure mindset I was talking about before. You want to embrace them for who they are, ask them what they want, and they'll tell you. Believe me, they will tell you. They're not shy. So, quick story. How much time do I have? I don't want to go over time. Okay, I think we're okay. I'll tell you one story. I was trying to engineer a solution for somebody who was blind and deaf. Trying to look into a possibility of promoting communication for this deaf-blind person using touch technology, tactile technology, in a sense that it doesn't require having the interpreter sitting directly next to the deaf-blind person. So I'm sorry, I believe, yeah, that's what it's called, tactile interpreting. I'm not sure if I'm getting the terminology correct. That's not really what's important. What is important is that the deaf-blind person relies heavily on the person sitting next to them to communicate what they need to so that they can experience what's happening around them. Trying to talk with the deaf-blind person, I was thinking maybe we give you some kind of a sleeve, maybe. And if I'm sitting across the room, I can touch my sleeve, and that would communicate something to you from across the room, tactile. Of course, we don't have a language developed that would translate well. We would have to build it. But so I was thinking like, okay, I have my arm and I touch it like this. So that means that's dinner time, I guess. And I touch my arm a different way. It means, hey, it's cold outside or it's raining. I don't know. The point I'm trying to make is I was talking to this woman who was blind and deaf about what kind of ideas would work for her, where she would be able to be free of having to rely on the person next to her to be able to communicate with anyone, anywhere, even over the computer. And she gave me an answer that blew me away. She didn't like it. And I asked her why. And she says to me, she spent her whole life thus far trying to remove this stigma of being able to touch the person next to her and the people around her. That's her world, and that's so critical to her, is to touch other people. And she was afraid that this new technology would mean that she would have to fight that stigma all over again of not being allowed to touch the people around her, or make it harder for her to touch them. The lesson I'm trying to teach you is you want to ask them what they want before you go too far. Get their perspectives, their thoughts, and incorporate that thought process into whatever you're trying to solve. Something else I want to talk about a little bit here. to give you a sense of the deaf perspective in architecture. And I'm not going to explain this slide too deeply. The point I'm making here with this slide is to give you an idea that, okay, we can do this in deafness. Well, we can do this for people who are blind, for people with mobility disabilities, and all types of disabilities. This applies to everybody. What we're doing with this here is someone from Gallaudet University was looking at the architecture of the buildings and how we walk around buildings and how to make these spaces more what we call deaf-friendly. For example, I just mentioned earlier this podium. It's not good for me because it blocks your line of sight. You can't see my hands. So this takes us even a step further. If you think about deaf people talking with each other, their hands are moving. And they are looking at each other. They're not looking at what's in front of them, looking at each other. So there are areas where that's a problem. It's like steps, for example. We deaf people don't have problems going up and down steps. Well, assuming we don't have problems going up and down steps. But when I'm talking to somebody, my hands are moving, my eyes are looking at them. I'm not holding onto the rail, and I'm not looking at my feet and where I'm stepping. I could easily miss a step and fall. It happens a lot. Small things like that. So another example would be corners. If I'm walking through a hallway, you may be able to hear somebody coming around the corner. They might be carrying something very heavy, something pointy, something sharp, maybe. When I walk around that corner at the exact same time as that person, I get hurt. Oops. Now, how do you solve that? You build curves, not corners. You have curves, wide enough curves that I can see somebody coming long before I hit them. But that benefits you as well, because maybe you're busy looking at your phone, texting. You're not paying attention to what's happening around a corner. So the curve will save you too, if you're not looking, that is. The other person's hopefully not texting as well, and you can see each other. So this is what I mean when I'm talking about designing space. Okay, so here what I want to do is the intersection of technology and disability. And this is just a short point I want to make here. Technology has been evolving rapidly. The march of technology is never ceasing. It never stops. It's always marching on, adding new things, new ways of doing things. A lot of that is great for people with disabilities, for us people who are deaf. The improvements in accessibility to communication has been fabulous. We've benefited in so many ways with that, from starting with just the TTY, these old teletypewriters that basically you type something in and then the person on the other end of the line can read it. But today we have remote video technology that allows us to see somebody and talk to them in our language. But technology also introduces new barriers. For some of us people who are deaf, the biggest new barrier has to do with systems that are based on voice command controls. Voice recognition, speech recognition systems. They're wonderful. I'm not here to bash them. I know that they are incredibly helpful and they're great, but they're barriers for us that weren't before. And some companies take the time to solve those and by providing workarounds, and that's great. The point here is technology has pros and cons. It gives us good things, and it also creates new barriers that we need to be aware of. So be aware of that when you're solving problems. Keep in mind how this could affect other groups, other people, to make sure it's accessible for everyone. And it's hard to do, I know. There's so many different types of disabilities, so many different things that you can do to solve. But what I really want to hit home is that disability is part of the human experience. Every last one of us, like I said, is going to have a disability at some point. So if we solve things that benefit everyone, we are engineering for a better tomorrow. Something also I'd like to mention. These are images of hunting tools. when we think of assistive technology, we tend to think of assistive technology as something that's a technology for somebody with special needs, technology to help people navigate life. But really, assistive technology is for the benefit of all of us. Every piece of technology is designed to be assistive in one way or another. I want to encourage you, whatever field you're in, when you're working on any kind of an assistive technology, realize that it's meant to benefit everyone, not just the special people you're trying to serve. So this is a snapshot from The Matrix. You have the red pill and the blue pill. Red pill, you take the red pill, you'll swallow it, you'll wake up tomorrow morning back in your everyday life and forget everything that happened to you and move forward as if nothing ever happened. Or you can take the blue pill and realize that there's a lot to learn, a lot that you can apply to your lives. And maybe nothing will ever be the same for you again. So that pretty much covers my presentation today. Thank you for listening, and I hope that there was something here that you were able to learn today. Please reach out to me. This is my email address. So I think I do have some time left for questions. Let me see what time it is. 12:08. 12:08. So we have 7 minutes for questions. I know I'm supposed to allow 15 minutes. I apologize. I cut half your time. Yes, in the back.
I'm sorry, could you go back to your email again? I wasn't able to write it down fast enough. Thank you.
Oh, yes, of course, sir, sure. Yes.
Hi, I have a hearing loss, and one of the biggest problems that I deal with is phone calls. My company, OSU, uses Skype for business rather than landlines. So using something like CapCall or CapTel is not an option for me. Do you know of any VoIP types of accessibility for calling?
In CSD, we use Zoom as our preferred web conferencing tool. Are you familiar with Zoom? Would that help you?
Maybe. The problem is not so much when we have an organized meeting, but one of those quick pick up the phone type situations.
Our account with Zoom allows us to have a meeting whenever we want. You just need the person that you're talking to have the Zoom software. Well, it's not even software. There's nothing to download. It's all web-based. You just need to have the link. So you send them a link, and they would be able to connect on a video cam on their laptop, and the two of you would be able to see each other and hear each other via the Zoom connection. It works well for us, for me and other people in the company that use it. We use it for both one-on-one calls and we use it for meetings. Many of our CSD, I didn't tell you before, CSD is a completely virtual company. We are all over the country, and what we do is we have meetings using the Zoom platform, and we have what looks like the Brady Bunch, right? All these screens of different people connected, and everyone's talking. Sometimes we have to say, hey, we need to focus on this person so we're not all talking at once. It works well for us, but it also works well with one-on-one meetings. And the nice thing about the one-on-one stuff is I can expand the window to full screen and see the person that I'm talking to. So if they don't sign very well, I can read their lips. Is that helpful to you? Okay. Other questions? Nothing? Thank you so much for your time and attention. I really appreciate it. Thank you.